Hello and welcome here again live to the World Crypto Network. And we're talking again at the show, Read Rothbard and Use Bitcoin. Today we have a special guest on, Adam Kokesh. Adam, how are you doing? Where are you at?
Excellent. Yourself?
Oh, doing just fine. Looking forward to this discussion.
I gotta say, like the name of the show in and of itself is so cool. And I'm like, it was. I have. If you don't mind, Max, I kind of have to like. I have to respond to just to that because it is so. Like if I had to do my show again, I'd be like, dang it, that's taken. But like like Rothbard and Bitcoin. Like most people don't know this about me, but Rothbard really is the one who woke me up, and I can say that there were a lot of things that led up to that, and that the Libertarian Party had a big role, and that Ron Paul had a role in getting me to the point of being ready. But it was Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard. That was it. And I often say that we really need to be careful to not mythologize the moment of becoming a libertarian, or really realizing that you've been a libertarian all along because you're a human being and you believe in freedom, because it's inherent to having an independent will and consciousness and your own body kind of thing. But it's funny because for me, more than most people, I actually do kind of have an apocryphal moment, but it wasn't like, and then the cop was, and I realized that, man, Adam Kokesh was right about government all along. No, it was like, I was driving through the desert of southern New Mexico, and it was while I was running for Congress in 2010, and I was, by the way, it's you can listen to an audiobook now and tell people you read it in the age of the internet. Like, that's okay, you can get away with that. But like, I was listening to the audiobook. I wasn't actually reading while driving. That's dangerous. I only text while driving. Like, let's not get carried away here. But I was listening to the audiobook of Ethics of Liberty, driving home to Santa Fe from some event in Texas. And it was there was kind of a moment where I was like, what? Well, yeah, yeah. And there is a sort of intellectual point of things coalescing and fitting together. And if I may turn this into a plug for my book as the perfect segue to how you wanted to start the interview, that it, it often takes, a body of knowledge for people to really embrace libertarianism, because statism is the status quo that we have been embracing almost involuntarily our entire lives. Like, you have to displace that psychologically, mentally, on so many levels. And I use the analogy of like trying to make a sheet of glass out of, this is a really bad analogy, but it makes sense. Imagine you have a window frame, and you're trying to make a window out of snowflakes, and you're trying to form the snowflakes into a sheet of ice. It has, like, you can put a bunch in there, and they can kind of stick together, and you can tell someone about gun rights or freedom of speech or the invalidity of the drug war, and they'll get it. And it's like a snowflake landing, and it's going to melt, and but if you have enough, if they really fill the frame all at the same time, there's like a magic crystallization that happens of embracing a new paradigm. And this isn't totally unique to libertarianism. It's unique to libertarianism in that libertarianism represents the truth of social organization and human relationships in all the ways that we're in denial of the truth, and all the ways that we're lied to be taken advantage of right now. But like, I'm getting into gardening right now, and I'm reading a book about gardening, and I've had moments where I've been like, oh, that's how it works. And I had to have the pieces to make it. Now, libertarianism, like a social worldview, like as big as the issue of government or the lack thereof, that's big. Like, it's a bigger process, but it's the same thing for a lot of people. And so I wrote the book Freedom to be the easiest way for someone to get that, to get it down to 100 pages, because I love Ethics of Liberty, but I got to say, I think you can get a lot more people to read a 100-page book than a 400-page book. And of course, For a New Liberty was the one that I got when I was in jail. That was a big part of my inspiration for the book Freedom in particular, even though Ethics of Liberty was the one that really did it for me, just because I read it first and was ready for it back in 2010. But to be able to, I mean, when I was in jail, I basically decided to be the best rip-off artist in the freedom movement and take all these good ideas and put them on. So, Max, if you will, stop me before I just go for an hour and just ramble. But thank you. Read Rothbard, use Bitcoin.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
I love that name as well. And for me, it was exactly the opposite. I read For a New Liberty first, Ethics of Liberty second. And I started, of course, with the audiobook read by Geoff Riggenbaum, which is an amazing audiobook, available on Mises.org, so go get it.
Yep, for free on Mises.org. If you don't, and I want to caution people, anybody who's listening to this right now or watching, the world will not get past government a day faster because you read another book on economics. I want to be careful to, like, go to Mises.org, read Rothbard, but there's a point of diminishing returns, and I want people to be conscientious consumers of information. Like, if you haven't read either Ethics of Liberty or For a New Liberty or my book Freedom, you should stop watching this right now. Like, literally stop tune out. Like, as fun as this may be, go to Mises.org, get one of those. If you want the long version, if you want the 400-page version, if you want the 100-page version, you go to my website. That's thefreedomline.com. Now, it's not just a condensation of Rothbard. It's for me a condensation of everything that was important in influencing my worldview. And there are a couple of important updates to Rothbard since he was writing, and mainly in obviously cryptocurrency. Rothbard didn't get to talk about Bitcoin, and that's mentioned in Freedom, of course, and cryptocurrency is as critical to human progress. And the other one, just technology in general and how it's rendering government obsolete. And I'm not an expert on Rothbard. I haven't read every. I'm not and this is the point I'm getting at. But I don't think Rothbard was able to see the exponentiality of technology, or at least feel it the way that you can today, just a few decades later. My point is, in being a conscientious consumer of information, becoming a libertarian, getting to the point where you can advocate for it consistently. And that doesn't mean you have to know every political issue. That's not the point. You really don't. Don't think, oh, well, I want to be an advocate for freedom, so I'm going to study, public policy, and I'm going to learn every government law, and I'm going to learn how Congress works and how elections work and how the Supreme Court works and the history of case law. Fuck all that. No. That is not good. You don't, when you are helping someone realize that they're libertarian in something that they might call an argument, you don't benefit from arguing data and statistics and points and individual issues. You can let them bring an issue, and if you have a firm enough grasp of the philosophy, it's easy. You don't need it. You just go, well, where's the coercion? You understand the very basic concept of capitalism, of voluntarism, of human relationships being for mutual benefit when everybody chooses to engage in them, when they see that they're in their own self-interest, right? I mean, really basic stuff here. When you get to that, you can go, well, where's the coercion in the situation, and what are the consequences of that coercion? You can show that in any situation, but that's not really, what wakes people up. It's kind of a two-part process. You have to realize that the core of the philosophy is true. Don't hit, don't steal, don't kill, no exceptions, not even because you're called government. And you kind of have to apply that for yourself. And this is what I found is that there are a lot of people in this movement who get that first point, and then they don't. They can't embrace it automatically. They have to argue through it. And I think this is the, and a lot of us as libertarians who are capable of arguing consistently kind of take that the wrong way. Why are you arguing with me, you damn statist? And it's like, no, I'm trying to be more libertarian. Work with me. I need to hear it argued. I need to ask the questions that way. I need to hear it argued with that confidence. You don't have to insult me. Just come back with the calm, confident, collected demeanor of, this is the truth. And we can argue it all day if you want. Yes, we can show yes to that issue. Yes, that no, violence is not good there either. No, violence is not good there either. No, violence is not good. No, not even there. No, not even. No, not even. No, even with no. Violence is still bad for human happiness and productivity. Sorry. That's it. That's a universal, and you help people walk through it. But that's about it. And for most people, they're not like us, the nerdy early adopters. Even in Germany, the freedom movement is apparently dominated by nerdy white male INTJs spamming for Ron Paul from your parents. Now, there's a certain personality type, obviously, that's attracted to this message first, that has to figure out a lot. Most people don't. And the reason we have government is because most people perceive more than they should as the appropriate realms of rational ignorance. And it's like, no, just be a little less ignorant, just a little less. Just read this 100-page book. That's it. You don't read Rothbard. Don't go and spend hours and hours on 400-page books. Read this 100-page book and then go have fun and enjoy your life and buy Bitcoin and so on.
Exactly. I'm here. That is always the
I'm sorry, I gotta say, I'm not on Coke today. I'm here at Freedom Farm, and it's a little dusty and windy.
Well,
I apologize. I have to do this on camera. But yeah, my big Jewish nose is all red and crazy today. But I love it. I'm out here. I'm living it, and it's tough. I want to tell so many people who are, who spend countless hours behind a computer, that's all it is. Get out there and do so, even if it's for yourself. Show people that living free is more fun and enjoyable. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I can't say too much about what I'm doing, but I'm developing a piece of land from scratch, and I'm enjoying my freedom.
Exactly. That is what it's all about. And that's why the title of the show is also not just read Rothbard, right? Use Bitcoin. Action. That is what we need. Yes, accumulate a lot of knowledge. Get as much information as you can to a certain degree. But of course, we have to understand it. It's not just getting information. It's also meditating on that information and trying to understand it. And then once you have understood that, well, go out and do it. Do it. That's all that you can do at that point. And that's when you achieve wisdom. And that is why I'm such a big proponent of agorism, of actually going out there and living consistently, acting consistency in our philosophy, which is freedom. And so yeah, let's get into this book, which I do agree is a nice introduction. So of course we're going to talk about Adam Kokesh for President, kokesh.president.com in a bit. But first, let's get into the freedomline.com, where you can get the Freedom book over there. And here it is. Let's read the first chapter, The Philosophy, and then first subchapter, Freedom. Freedom is what you have when no one is forcing their will on you. Everyone inherently recognizes this as a good thing, because as all value our power to make decisions, we all value making decisions without being threatened. Unfortunately, most of us have not taken the time to consider the precise nature of freedom and its foundation in universally undeniable principles. Applying those principles to big issues may be complicated, but the concept of freedom is not. When applied consistently, it should be the way to a more harmonious society. So that is only the first chapter of this nice book. I encourage you to go out and check this information. Of course, it is available for free. There's also an audiobook version read by you, Adam, on YouTube. So you already said a bit on why you wrote this book, mainly to introduce, let's say, the layman towards this new quote unquote philosophy. But now looking back since the, I think, 4 years when you've published it, how can you say, was this book so far in your mind successful, and why?
Well, if I may first, this is actually section 1 of chapter 1. The start of the book with the introduction starts off with, right now is an amazing time to be alive. And that is an important premise of libertarianism that I think most libertarians miss, right? That we are very much drawn to this philosophy by seeing the problems in the world and wanting to solve them. We're not drawn to this by seeing, wow, humanity's doing awesome and progressing, and look how cool it is, and look at all this great stuff we've got, and yay, let's fight the system. It doesn't. That's just not how we come into it. So but it's a false premise if we say we need libertarianism because the world is going to hell. It's like, no, we need libertarianism because it's the natural course of human progress, of humanity getting better, of this exponential growth path that we're on, of just becoming better in every significant way over time. So the book, to answer your question, it's been an incredible success, and I've been just really blessed to be in a position to distribute such a thing. And I want to be clear, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, that I don't claim originality with any of the ideas in the book, and that's in there explicitly. And there's a section on intellectual property that makes it very clear. It's arrogant. It is really, when you really understand it properly, and like myself and yourself, Max, as content creators, it is insanely arrogant. It is disgustingly, and I know being offended is bullshit, but like it is really offensive for someone to write a book of any kind, no matter what it is, and say that it is so original that it's worth using the violence of government to make sure that only they get paid for anybody using the content of that book. It's like, and I know this is kind of corny breaking it down, because we want ways to reward intellectual property content creators. We want ways to reward creativity and entertainment and all those things, but you don't need the violence of government to do it. And that's the premise of intellectual property. And I know this is like, it's a bit of an esoteric issue for a lot of libertarians. I didn't come to it as one of my first issues or early on, and it really was a little difficult, like, to really wrap my head around intellectual property, because we've been, it's the propaganda of government that intellectual property is a form of property, and this metaphor has been foisted on us as if it represented physical reality, and it doesn't. Either there's real property or there's intellectual property. You can't have both unless you recognize that intellectual property is just a metaphor. So to have this humility is to recognize that, as you said, to use the old saying, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We see further because we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, who have raised up human knowledge. And it's, the shoulders of giants is almost like a false historic humility. There are no giants in human progress, and that's the important thing. It's also very humbling for me as an activist, as a human being, to know that the course of human development towards a voluntary society is not going to depend on whether or not Adam Kokesh is president of the United States in 2020 and gets to resign and throw the ring in the fire and dissolve the federal government. No, it cannot depend. If I'm right, if we are right, if this is the way for humanity to progress, then this is the development that is shaped by forces of nature bigger than any of us as individuals. The most we can ever hope to do is color the surface of this giant wave that we are riding as mere atomic particles, if we're lucky to be at the crest to get to see further. Maybe if we're lucky, if we get to write books and make podcasts and do interviews and run for office and maybe even take the reins of some political power in order to destroy it, maybe we get to accelerate that process instead of decelerating it or sitting on the sidelines. But that's really about it. And so when I created this book, it was because I just wanted to be on the right side of history. I wanted to know that I was pushing in the right direction towards human progress, and I wanted to give people what I got out of that understanding and how it has improved my life.
Yes, okay, and I absolutely agree with your thoughts on intellectual property, and I do defend quite heavily the argument that intellectual property is utter bullshit and utter nonsense. And I strongly defend the Stephen
Well,
Kinsella
I
case.
like to concede. I like to concede to people because I think this helps them understand it, that you could use intellectual property as a metaphor in a contract, right? Like if you and I were writing a book and we wanted to have a way of describing how we handle the content of that book, that you don't share it with anybody without them signing an NDA, then we could have intellectual property as a metaphor in the contract context. And then people go, oh, okay. So you can use voluntary means of sequestering information for specific purposes still in Adam's world, in a free market world. It's not like all information I can see inside your computer and you have to let me have all of your data and your private. Obviously not. You know, you can still have, well, whatever. Anyway, yeah, it is an important issue to tackle.
Yes, yes, and we had Stephen Kinsella on the show just a couple of days ago,
Oh, he's great.
and oh yes, absolutely, and he stresses also in his book the importance of realizing that a non-scarce good is a good that when you give it away, you still retain a copy, so to speak. So in the act of giving, you actually increase the network which this non-scarce good inhabits. And so if you give away ideas, it doesn't mean that you no longer have them. You still retain them. But because you share it, more people, more nodes are in this network. And
Yeah, and
and squared.
if I may, that's kind of the perfect segue for something that I wanted to bring up in pointing out the difference between my book and just, Rothbard condensed, which is that when I say like there's something that it gives to me, there's a chapter in there that I don't think Rothbard certainly doesn't cover in Ethics of Liberty or For a New Liberty, and it's the element of personal freedom and psychological and emotional freedom and internal freedom. And this is a really important thing to realize, excuse me, about the nature of reality of being a human, of being this independent consciousness. We don't get to control our environment, right? We can try and affect it, and we control enough to support ourselves, sure. We cannot control what happens to us either. Now, we want to think we can control our reactions, and to a certain extent we can, but to a large degree, our reactions are programmed. If I hit you on the foot with a hammer, you can't say, no, I choose to be happy because I'm sovereign in my own mind. No, it's going to freaking hurt. Like if I kick you in the balls, that's just the cold hard reality. Your brain is programmed to go, ouch, sorry. And even as we respond to emotional stimulation from other human beings, as we respond to beauty in the environment or horror or just ugliness in the environment, we cannot control entirely our responses to those things. And I don't think we should try or too much try to resist those things. But we absolutely, by virtue of our free will, we control our reactions to those reactions. The human mind has that power in every instance that we can stay conscientious of this, to choose our state of reacting to the stimulus in the environment. And when that's the case, there are certain times you're going to choose to be angry because anger serves you in lifting a car off your injured child, and that's fine. You can, use that, harness that. You can choose to sit and stew in depression if you feel that you need to be processing some information. Like, that's okay if it's conscientious and deliberate. It's your choice. But by and large, the effect of people realizing this is that they choose to be happy a hell of a lot more than when they forget this or when they don't stay aware of this. And it's not necessarily when I'm a thin libertarian, in the sense that libertarianism by itself is just this, right? It's just the philosophy, self-ownership, the non-aggression principle. Aesthetics, something completely separate. But there is something inherent to this idea of emotional freedom that is really connected to that is undeniably connected to the philosophy. And it's because the people that want to use statism to control you have to manipulate you emotionally. But at a deeper level, as a sort of like, what's the point? You know, really, what's the point of this? You know, pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I mean, referencing that old chestnut. That when we say that we get to pursue happiness, I think that's a lie. I think in and of itself, Jefferson was wrong to use that language, because there were different drafts, right, in the Declaration, like pursuit of property or whatever. There was some other wording that was more like property, and in fact, that might have been more appropriate for the political context, because when you say pursuit of happiness, happiness is not something that is pursued. This is so important. This is such a fundamental truth, just of human nature, of you existing as a human being. You have to know this, that happiness is not something that you chase down and beat over the head with a club and drag back to your cave to enjoy. Happiness is a choice that you make in the moment. And you can make that at any point. You aren't whole and healthy and not overwhelmed by some painful stimulus, right? Which is most of the time we get to do this. We get to choose this. So I would sort of challenge the libertarian movement with this idea. What's the point of being free if you don't know how to be happy? And if you can be happy now, you're more likely to induce freedom in the future. You know, what is it that drives statism fundamentally, like from a psychological level, among the oppressors? You know, a desire to control and dominate out of fear, not a desire to dance forward with the rest of humanity in this incredible journey out of joy and happiness and love, which really motivates us more at our core as human beings.
Oh, yes. And I really like the point that you bring up of taking your freedom, of not just, waiting until it is there, but actually in every moment living it and living in accordance to it. And that is fundamentally what agorism is all about, to be consistent, as I said earlier, with this philosophy, your thoughts, emotions, and actions. If these three aspects of the mind are mind, heart, and gut are actually in accordance and paddling all in the same direction, then you can achieve liberty at any moment. And
now, I just want to say, like, it's really tempting to think it's easy, right? Like, and it is one, like, just be happy, like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Well, if you want to be happy, just choose to be happy. And like, yeah, there's a lot of truth. There's some like edges and caveats, but yeah, that's the basic truth of human reality. If you want to be happy, choose to be happy. And it's not easy. And I used to say to a lot of people, I used to say it on my show a lot, live like government doesn't exist and be happier as a result. And it's easy to say. It's really hard to live, and because government does exist and it's out there. But I like to quote, or at least I like to reference John McAfee, who I supported for the Libertarian Party nomination for president in 2016, because he tells stories where it's like, I was walking down the street smoking a joint and I got arrested, and when I got out, I just did it again, and it's like, I strive every day to stay in that headspace and to live like, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to do my thing. And I'm going to be free. And like I said, living out here, unfortunately, because of government, I can't talk about a lot of what I'm doing, but I really am enjoying freedom in a way that most people don't get to. And I can't wait to see everybody get that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it is achievable, right? It is achievable one step at a time. It is inevitable.
It's inevitable.
Exactly. And we are all striving towards liberty, which is, of course, the fundamental goal. But where I think many still, do have different opinions is how to reach that goal. So, I personally am a agorist. I'm like, I walk away. I do no longer support the old system whatsoever. I exit it as soon as I can and as fast as I can.
Hold on. I want to put you on the spot for that, because you're on the internet. You're in what looks like a conventionally constructed building. You pay taxes at some level on those things in Germany, right?
Well, Yes, yes, of course. But wherever
And
I
I
can.
still pay property taxes here. Like that's my compromise. That's my leave me alone fee. But um, I just want to point out there's no perfect, there's no ideal. You're going to contribute unless you want to be a monk living on a mountaintop.
Exactly, and there's the question: where do we, for the moment, make the compromise of, as you said, paying for the opportunity to be left alone? Because at some point you have to cooperate, and the hassle of not cooperating is oftentimes much more greater than the benefit you might perceive. Uh, but nevertheless, we do have a lot of possibilities of exiting the system. Stop using the fiat system. That is one thing that I think by now you can achieve quite easily. Living only with Bitcoin, it's possible. It's quite doable, actually. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that already instantly, with that exit, with that walking away, you have diminished the power. You've halved the power of government fiat. Because as soon as one node leaves a network and enters another network, this other network increases and the old network decreases by
Yeah.
half. This is how Metcalfe's law works. The power of a network is the number of nodes squared. As soon as you exit, you have halved this network. And of course, a other attribute would be to be active and to try to change the system from within, which of course would be more of a political means. So maybe Adam, could you go more into the question of the difference of when is it okay just to walk away and when should we jump in and try to fix the system from within?
Well, it's never not okay to walk away. Like it's always, so the way you ask that question, I have to just point that out. Like it's always okay to walk away. You should never. It's like the government anti-harassment campaigns. Like no relationship should be forced. No means no. Like yeah, you should always have the right to refuse to walk away to disengage from the system. Of course, that right is uh, generally not respected in the world of statism. If you live in a country with a government, your options are very limited in that. Now, I used to be a much bigger advocate of excuse me of agorism in terms of like the homesteading lifestyle, and I'm still a big fan of it. I'm still committed to it for myself. I think it's still a big deal, but I think it's more important to strive instead of like how do I find myself total self-sufficiency and independence to how do I help humanity become independent of the systems of coercion and monetary theft through the US dollar and all fiat currencies, essentially. So I would say that at this point, I'm much more of a fan of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general than all those other things, because that really is one thing that you can do without substantially changing your lifestyle in any other way. Use Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, use Bitcoin, have some savings in Bitcoin, have some investment in cryptocurrency, whatever, however it is that's appropriate for you, figure that out, do it. That's more important than growing your own vegetables. That's more important than building your own house. That's more important than getting your own electricity from solar. Those are all good, important things. And even Bitcoin is a big, important thing. But I'm still, and I hesitate to call it working within the system because what I'm doing in politics is very much anti-political. I hate to be introduced as a politician when I'm an anti-politician. And every time I'm introduced by someone who says, Eddie's running for president in 2020, like a part of me dies inside because you really have to be some kind of psychopath to say, I want to be president of the United States of America. I want to be in charge of this giant violent monopoly and this crazy military. And I want to force my will on the entire country and most of the world too. No, you really have to be fucked in the head to want that power over other human beings that simply shouldn't exist. And I love that every time someone introduces me as a candidate for president, I get to make that point. But my platform is really in line with the ideals of that, and it's really the only practical and the only principled platform for a president to embrace at this point in our history, and that's the peaceful, orderly, responsible dissolution of the entire United States government. And I love saying that I'm not going to even put on the ring of power. It is going to go straight into the fire. Day one, and you know what, we still have to work out some of the legal technicalities of this, but on day one, I'm going to go and sign one executive order. I might sign a list of pardons before that. Everybody who's in federal prison for victimless crimes, there's going to be a way of processing them and helping them transition. But basically, the first thing I do is resign and declare the federal government of no authority. It's a bankrupt institution. I am there as a bankruptcy agent. I resign from the presidency to become custodian of the federal government. That's the title that I have picked for this position, that I would then be overseeing the dissolution of the federal government as a bankruptcy agent, with the fiduciary responsibility of paying back the true creditors, the American people, not the foreign banks and governments and corporations that own the national debt on paper. That's bullshit. It's an illegitimate debt. We're essentially writing that off by declaring bankruptcy as the American people. Now, the big objection that people raise to this is, well, Adam, that doesn't sound very constitutional. And I go, heck no. Of course it's not constitutional. That's kind of the point. Neither was the first American Revolution in line with the laws of King George III. Obviously, this is something else. We are appealing to the higher authority known as the Declaration of Independence within the American political tradition, which says that we have not only a right but a duty to alter and abolish systems of government that no longer serve us. So if some judge or some congressman or senator stands up and says, but Mr. Kokesh, you can't do that, that's not constitutional, the American people are going to be there with our pitchforks if we have to. This is going to be, while technically I am running for president, it is much more accurate to say that I am using the presidential election as a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. And when the American people, through that process, decisively say, no, we're not going to put up with this crap anymore, no asshole in a suit in Washington, D.C., or a robe, or whatever, nobody's going to stand in our way.
And I do like this approach in that sense, that it is a system, or it is a approach to, within the system, make the system break on such a level that the result is that everyone walks away. So this is agorism in anti-politics.
Yeah. It's like, what would you like if the American people said, crap, we don't want to do this government thing anymore. We're all libertarians now, but we don't know what to do. We're really dependent on the system. A lot of us work for government. A lot of us have family members that work for government. A lot of us are dependent on government assistance. Libertarians, how do we get out of this system? And the answer is really, really simple and really unifying. And it's localization. Let's not pull the rug out from underneath people. Let's not have a revolution. Let's have an evolution where you get rid of government just one layer at a time. And when we talk about getting rid of the federal government, we're talking about 3 million employees out of 22 million that work for government at all layers in the United States. We're talking about trimming this layer of disgusting, wasteful fat off the top. That's it. And doing it in a peaceful, orderly way that leaves us with 50 independent states, up to 562 sovereign native nations, and about 15, as we have them, populated territories, which would become sovereign at that point as well. And we don't want to pull the rug out from underneath anyone, like I said. So when you get the localization idea really in front of the American public, and it's happening slowly but surely every day with this campaign, it's unifying, and it's almost magical, really, what this does for the libertarian movement. And we have to take leadership in this. And it's strange for us to do. We want to expect everybody to be as smart as us and get what we get and care about what we care about. And it's not going to happen. Like, it's unrealistic to demand that the average human being on earth read a bunch of books by Rothbard so we can have our revolution. Like, no, that's not going to happen. It's not. So how do we take leadership? How do we make it easy for people? Say, look, I can get on board with that. I don't have to understand it. It's going to make my life better right away. Well, if you're a conservative, you're a liberal, that's great. You live in a liberal state, you live in a conservative state. Wouldn't you rather be independent than tied together and forced to live by the other people's preferences being forced on you through the perverted lens of the federal government, twisted by special interests and lobbyists? That's insane. So this means I don't have to argue with you about what government is, what it should be. What do you want it? And the message of libertarianism for too long has been very arrogant, based on government is this and it should be this and not this and only this and this and this. And it's like, no. Get back to the core principle. It's about voluntarism, right? That's what it's about, the non-aggression principle. So our message should really be, you can have as much government as you want, as long as it's voluntary. As long as you don't force it on anybody, don't force it on me, don't force it on your neighbors, and that's fine. And that you should respect the individual right on my own property that I can choose to live under whatever system of government I want or none at all. And when we get to that point, yeah.
What you bring up here is, of course, the difference between the federal and the state level. And of course, decentralization is a huge improvement to centralization, especially yes. when authority is involved. You want to decentralize this authoritative power as much as possible, if not abolish it altogether. Yeah. And so the question for me would be, is it that you are just going to abolish the federal government and leave the states as they are? Or are there further plans of dismantling authority, even on a more localized level?
Hey, slow down there, you radical extremist. You, one step at a time here, all right? Let's have a peaceful, orderly dissolution, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so yes, that is the ultimate goal, obviously, of localization, is to get government down to the individual level, where the individual has the right to opt out on their own property or in their own apartment and have their own system. And with decentralized government, except for those things that are necessitated by immediate geography, to be able to choose where these systems are, what systems, with what terms, provide them with the services, because there are some important services, even though there are more disservices done by government, there are some essential services that people should have the choice in what to get. So one step at a time. And this is a hard thing, because even as a Rothbardian, you don't want to be a gradualist. Right? So we're not being gradual in the sense of saying we'll accept some coercion here. All we're saying is that, yeah, you don't have to blow up all the buildings today. We can actually have a peaceful process of repurposing them, of saving all the value, of preserving the important community-based social institutions that really help people and hold communities together. But the idea is that we would have a process for dissolving the federal government and just looking at the size of the institution, and it's impossible to say if we're going to be liquidating it for Bitcoin or Dash or Smart Cash or Bitcoin Cash or who knows what currency at this point, if the dollar is going to be around at all then. But it's going to take, just for the logistics of it, right? To look at the major institutions of the military, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA. I'm sure someone's going to say, well, those are the big ones, right? You just think of those big institutions in the federal government. The logistics of just reordering those physical properties is going to be a multi-year process. So again, the important thing, we throw the ring in the fire right away. The federal government is of no authority. It has no authority. Its laws are unenforceable. It is a bankrupt institution. It is a custodial institution going through a bankruptcy process. So none of its laws will be enforced, but that doesn't change the fact that when we say, hey, there's no more U.S. military, there's still the physical reality of bases all over the world, of individuals who get paychecks from the military, and there needs to be that orderly unwinding of that. So, the troops home from abroad overseas right away, that's really easy to say, yeah, we're just going to do that. But there's a logistics process there. There's a responsibility for the facilities. Even if we say, we want to sell them, right? And I think that's really the goal in liquidating the federal government, to pay back the American people. And by the way, this is another cool part of it. We're never going to have perfect justice, right? And this is a tough thing for a lot of us as activists who are motivated by injustice to accept. And a lot of liberals even the Green Party types, I think, are too caught up in the materialism of this. And a big part of the message has to be, even the libertarians, because there are a lot of libertarians who are like, well, I got a ticket when I was 15 years old and the state stole $100 from me and I want that back as we're tearing down the government. Like, no, no, no. And obviously that's a silly example of when there are great injustices, like where, millions, I guess over human history, billions of humans have been killed by government. You're not going to get justice. Sorry, it's going to be impossible to untangle this entire knot perfectly. But we can do something to pay back the American people. So if I go in as a bankruptcy agent, I go, well, gee, how do I pay back the American people as equitably as possible? It's not going to be perfect, but we liquidate the assets of the federal government that don't get passed down to the states. And we use that to fund Social Security as a public trust, not a public institution as in a government institution, although you could call it public. I mean, the definitions become kind of silly, right? Is it public? Is it private? But that there would be a public trust of a Social Security administration. They would continue to pay out those funds until they're gone to every, and maybe there's a way that we lower the retirement age to 18, but it's going to be a mechanism like that is my responsibility to find what is the most practical, equitable way to liquidate the assets of the federal government that don't get transferred down to the states and pay back the American people.
And this, of course, then brings up the question: if someone can prove that he has been stolen from the government in a previous case, in my opinion, he would have a right to get this money back before someone else would receive it. However, of course, many people have been stolen from by the government, because that's, after all, what it does. And then the question is that a thief that has made promises, do those people that have received these promises have a right to this promise?
Right. And I hope that in the process of dissolving the federal government that we get to explore special compensation, but really it's going to have to be extremely precisely defined and pretty limited. I think the greatest damages that someone can have as a claim against the federal government is for unjust imprisonment. And, if we're able to compensate people as we release them from jail, for people like Ross Ulbricht, and Schaefer Cox, who are in jail for victimless crimes, I think that would be the priority. But I hate to say it, at some point, sorry, you're not going to get to steal from this custodial institution because, your grandpa's business got shut down by the IRS, or because you paid all these taxes. In a sense, we've all been victims, and we all have to just accept a certain degree of that. And there's a hard point for some Rothbardians to accept here, but I really have to kind of lay it out in a way that makes it clear that there is a solid philosophical foundation for all of this, and it's that property is fundamentally subjective. And as Rothbardians, we really want to be objective, and I think of myself as an objectivist. I'm looking for objective truth. I apply, the scientific method in discovering truth, and we think of self-objective, right? We objectively own ourselves, and maybe we can go that far and say, I own my mind, I own my body. That's absolute property ownership, objective, no questions asked. But outside of that, there is a certain degree of subjectivity, and I use the example of land to make this a very easy example, which is that if I, and by the way, I'm here on 10 acres, and I know that if I put up a fence around 10 acres and say, this is mine, I'm homesteading this, that no one can really object to that, unless it's like, in the middle of a river that everybody's using, right? And there's the whole other, and this approach actually makes it a lot easier to figure out, what appropriate natural resources are to be shared. But if I put up a fence around 1,000 acres and say, I own 1,000 acres because I put up a fence around it, and I'm not using it, and I'm not really defending it, most people would say, that's not a legitimate property rights claim. Now, this is why the government does not have a legitimate property rights claim when they essentially say, we own everything in the borders of the United States. Bullshit, right? I can't put up a fence around 1 million acres and say, well, because I drew it on a map, or if I was to say I draw a line on a map and say I own that because no one else has claimed it, my ownership claim is not valid. And every claim to ownership in that sense essentially is what has to be respected by society. Ownership is a product of the market as well. And, a big part of what we're doing as libertarians is trying to improve the market for ideas and property rights and self-ownership, and improve the market sense of what is right and wrong so that the market doesn't demand government violence as a mechanism of control. So what we're doing as a society is saying, we no longer consent to the existence of the federal government, and we're gonna commit to this one mechanism of, yes, redistribution of stolen wealth to the people it's been stolen from as best as we practically can, so that we can move on and enjoy freedom.
Yes, good points that you bring up, and maybe let's dive a bit more deeper into the importance of competition, and with an example in cryptocurrencies, because of course Bitcoin is open source, which means anyone on the entire planet at no cost whatsoever can copy the code base of Bitcoin and fork it off, right? Create something new, and maybe adapt it to the specific circumstances that the individual finds himself. Yeah. And of course, that creates a lot of nonsense, a lot of bullshit, and a lot of stuff that really is not that valuable, at least on the general point of view. But what it is individualistic, of course. So even though most people will say that such copies are not valuable, they might be for only a few individuals, only a handful of individuals. And the important thing is that in a free society, even this hyper minority, even only 1 or 2 or 3 people, if they really want to use a currency, then they can.
Everybody gets what they want. That's freedom. Everybody gets what they want.
And so this is, of course, anarchy. Nobody is enforcing authority over anyone. It is, as I said, pure freedom. So maybe could you go a little bit more into detail how competition and freedom works both in the money, but then also in a political sense?
Well, I want to ask you a question first, because I mentioned a few different cryptocurrencies, and I noticed that you had a bit of a reaction. You got a horse in this race? Are you a Bitcoin core original evangelist? Is that where you're coming from?
Well, the thing is, I use Bitcoin, and I use it every single day. And to be honest, although I try to use this technology always, I've never had the possibility of truly using any other coin than Bitcoin. So for me, it just is Bitcoin because it is the most useful currency. And I do think that it is also the most secure currency and the currency with the most chances of succeeding both economically, with having an unchanging money supply. The unchangeability of Bitcoin is so important because it gives us certainty that the money supply will not change, which is, of course, the fundamental of any sound currency. And then also just on a technical side, the expertise that is in Bitcoin development is astounding. And in my opinion, it is second to none. So both from a philosophical, but also from a technical and from an economical point of view. Plus, with all the use cases, I simply think that Bitcoin is the most useful currency. That's why I use it.
Well, there's undeniably one thing that Bitcoin doesn't have, and that is a dog for a mascot. So I say Dogecoin to the moon. That's me. I'm just kidding. I like to say that I'm not an expert, and I don't think anybody can really predict what the future of crypto is. It could go either way because there are a lot of good arguments, and you lay out the case there very well succinctly for the Bitcoin originalism. Is there a term for that? Is there like a better term in the community do we have a better term for Bitcoin originalism?
It's Bitcoin maximalism, but I really do not like this term.
Right. Okay. Why?
Because maximalism implies that someone is like everything, right? And I do not think that this will happen. As I said, even if a handful of people want to use a different currency, they can and they will.
Yeah, there will always be a market for fringe specialty currencies, is what you're saying, huh?
Exactly. But I also realize the economic aspect of the argument that we only need one money, and it is a network good. And the more people use it, the more valuable it is. So there has always been a tendency towards one sound money. And that is just, economic fact. Yes, this can be broken. Yes, in the short term, this does not always apply. And especially with government currencies, this is fundamentally broken, as governments always distort markets. But I do believe that in a completely and radical free market, as open source cryptocurrencies are, I do think that here the economic laws of free markets do apply.
Well, I think there's obviously there's the possibility of it being anything other than Bitcoin, right? I mean, it could be that Bitcoin Core, whatever it is, that there's the, I don't think anybody can say with certainty that a flippening won't happen, that there won't be some. I mean, if some major financial interest in the world today, some central bank or Soros funded institution or whatever, put $1 billion into trashing Bitcoin and blowing up some altcoin, that there could be a flippening and that the dominant crypto would become something else. And there are other advantages to other coins. The thing that I think is actually more likely is that some kind of crypto hedge fund is going to come along and create like a basket of currencies that is going to be tokenized in and of itself, and that conglomerate currency would become the world dominant currency. Although, again, I just think that's one likely possibility, as much as Bitcoin maintains dominance and kind of, eventually edging out every other cryptocurrency until it's just sort of fringe specialty purpose, or something else entirely, where money's kind of irrelevant. I mean, I think, and this might be, and I'm not trying to like buck the premises of anarcho-capitalism here, but that, who knows, in 500 to 1,000 years, when we're all floating around in the ether controlling robots with our, robot brains, or we've uploaded our bodies into machines, who knows, that at that point, money might be irrelevant. But until then, and so my point is that it's not like there is no till the end of time here. At some point, the premises of human society that even make Bitcoin awesome are going to change. And it might be 10,000, 20,000 years, but I think it's less. I think that the human experience accelerates exponentially. That's the nature of technology. And that's something important in my book. But to answer your question about competition, it's sort of that it's easier to see government as a sort of series of services that government has a forced monopoly on. And the one that underpins all of them is that it's a territorial monopoly on justice services and defense services, and those that are directly connected to force and violence. And when it says we have this monopoly, it does it by just creating a territory that it protects and defends, and by fostering nationalism and getting people to defend these artificial government borders that are imposed on a population. In the United States, it's even worse, because we've been taught this great myth of the formation of the story of America of conquest and domination and settling unclaimed lands, and instead of being taught this as a natural course of human progress and just development around the world, that it was America and it was our government that made it possible. It's like, no, it's the government that slowed it down and held it back and perverted it and made it a lot more painful, destructive than it needed to be otherwise, especially in light of what Native Americans experienced primarily at the hands of the United States military of the time. So when you have competition for those services, you obviously can get justice services, dispute resolution services, protection services, defense services, all of those things more efficiently through the free market than from government. What we have to do first to get to that point is to break the territorial monopoly, to break the geographic monopoly. And that can happen through collapse, that can happen through secession on an individual state by state basis. And if I'm wrong about, like, I'm not making the prediction that I'm going to win in 2020 and this is going to happen. By the way, I make the prediction that we're going to win the Libertarian Party nomination on this platform in 2020, and we're going to break 10%. But that's going to be enough to introduce these ideas into the American mainstream so that we're going to win in 24. And if not me personally winning on this platform, someone on a platform of this kind of fundamental change will win politically on that timeline. Like, yeah, agorists, if you don't show us a quicker way, the political system is going to experience a significant upheaval in the direction of freedom and justice one way or another. I think that this is the easiest, the most likely, and the most peaceful, and the way that preserves the most value in terms of human life and blood and treasure in going through this process. So breaking the geographic monopoly is really important psychologically as well. That happening first just down to the states, again, to get back to the core of your question, competition among governments or government service providers, right? That you're going to have an immediate competition among the states. And it's going to be, instead of everybody suffering under the federal government and it not mattering that much what state in the United States you live in legal terms. Now, it does a lot. There's still a lot of variety, don't get me wrong. But it's going to be much greater differentiation between states when you get rid of the federal government. And I think there's going to be a race to dissolve fastest. You're going to see a race to the bottom, as in a race down to the individual. We get government, we get rid of the federal government, get rid of state governments. And you get government down to the county level in the U.S., really, as libertarians, at that point, we're done. There's no, when government is at the county level, there is no drug war. There is no war on terror. There is no war on your privacy. There's not even any unjust taxation, because when government is down at the county level, they really can't stop you from seceding on your own property. At least in the United States, and I know in Germany and in different parts of the world, you have all sorts of different subdivisions for government, but every government has this subsidiarity structure where there are, local elements that report to bigger elements. It's kind of a pyramid, like a racket, like a pyramid racket. Anyway, it's obviously a scam, and when you get it down to the county level, that's that level that I think approximately starts to represent communities, right? You can't say that a state in the United States is a community. No way. I mean, it's maybe in a big abstract sense, but like a county, now you're getting close. And I think when you get government down to the county level, that's when you're going to see people just breaking off, forming their own communities, being able to be independent. Now, bear in mind, during this time, because this isn't a sort of Luddite, primitivist position. If anything, this is a high-tech, progressive, vision for humanity moving forward. I hate to use the P word, progressive, there, but in the truest sense of the word, it's progressive, not regressive, right? That we see this, forward motion. This is humanity accelerating, and while we have the geography monopoly being broken, getting government down to the local and to the community level, at the same time, simultaneously, we see the birth of decentralized networks, of blockchain, of global companies. They wouldn't really be corporations anymore, but like maybe there's a global company for a certain insurance service, and you get to choose on your property who's going to do that for you from any company that's going to be worldwide. You're going to have things like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, that is now like, where's our money coming from? I'm not like, is it decentralized or is it centralized? Is it globalized or is it localized? It's kind of hard to argue, but it doesn't matter. It's all voluntary. And you're going to see the rise of networks that are appropriate to the scale of what's being provided based on what people want, as expressed through the market and peaceful cooperation. So if you want, maybe we end up with a global government of, dispute resolution services in a network that all cooperate and communicate, but you can still choose your own and you can opt out at any time. Maybe we have a global currency that's Bitcoin, but no one's really worried about it being a global currency because it's still all voluntary and it's still based on a network that people can opt out of on their own. So that's as government is localized and you get that competition, you also get the competition for all governance or government services at the same time.
Yes, interesting points that you bring up, and I do agree with you in the statement that this is a war of the mind and a war on ideas first and foremost. And this means that it will not be resolved in a vacuum. Actual minds have to be changed, right? We need to not convince, but we need to lay out ideas so that others can pick them up and for themselves achieve understanding of the subject. And
well, see, for the political, I think there's a in the United States, and I've actually, how many people do you think in Germany are libertarians? One, in the big inclusive sense, and two, in the conscientious, understands voluntarism sense. Percentage of the population in Germany.
Well, of course, I do think that everyone is in a sense libertarian, but just doesn't know it yet. But more on the concrete sense of how many actually preach liberty, not too many. Actually, socialism is quite the most prevalent ideology in Germany, and it is lived by many people. And so I would say that the percentage of socialists and sometimes even straight up communists is much more greater than those of active libertarians.
Oh, no, of course. And I assume it would be very, very small anyway. But can you give me, like in the United States, we certain surveys, when you say, do you identify as a liberal, conservative, or libertarian, you'll get like 15% libertarian. But I would argue that as a movement, of people who don't, because that's great. You identify as a libertarian. That's a first step. That's an important gateway for people. Use the word. But of people who really get it and understand it, I would say we're between 1.5% and 2% of the population, and that would be 1% of the United States would be 3.3 million. So 4.5 to 6 million people in the United States. I think conscientiously understand libertarianism at some philosophical level. I would assume in Germany we're talking more like, and this is just my guess, but to put it in those terms, correct me if I'm wrong here, that it would be more like 3 or 4% who identify as libertarian in the inclusive sense, and probably 1/4% who get it intellectually. Is that fair? Something like that?
Yes, I would say so. Roughly in that ballpark of maybe 5 to 10%. If we are really, loosely speaking about freedom-minded people, but again, I do think that a vast majority is so close before understanding it.
Right. So here's my point, though, in how we move forward. What we need to do, and it's like, if we want a free society, we need to stop telling other people what to do. But if we really, in an activist sense, what we need to do, there are two big things, and I think there is, from just my understanding of the message and of human psychology and society and personality types as distributed across any population, I would say globally speaking, there's about 10% of every population that is already inherently libertarian. The punks, the rebels, the misfits, the people who like conscientiously embrace, standing up to the man in some way, right? Like it's inherent, and you can give them my 100-page book, right? And they'll get it and go, boom, done. And I don't think we're ever going to get to more than that. And we never have to, right? Because once we get so if we're like 2% in the United States right now, we get to 10%, that's 5 times what we are right now, at least. That's the critical mass that allows us to build the political consensus for localization. How we get to that next level of acceptance of libertarianism is to, instead of libertarianism being a philosophical idea and a bunch of books and a political party, it's about localization, and it makes your life better. It's your life more peaceful. It's your life more prosperous. It's you more happy. You get more stuff. You have less to worry about. And those are sort of like two separate things. We have these, like the movement is, a series of growing concentric circles. That core, I think, needs to get to about 10%. And that 10 to 15% now needs to get to like 60, 70%. of the population to be that critical mass. And you're not going to do that by writing books, because people don't freaking read books. And you're never going to, I mean, like, I hope I can get my 10% with a book, right? But realistically, am I going to get 60 to 70% of a population to read anything? Hell no. That's silly. So, thinking as a capitalist, as a libertarian, like, I challenge you, how do you provide the service that we can provide to the general public as efficiently and as easily as possible for them that maximizes profit for everyone? And it's not arguing with people in bars and yelling at them or debating necessarily or any of that. It's really just about showing people, hey, this makes your life better right away. Here's how we apply these principles. Your life is better. You can go back to ignoring politics now.
Exactly. And that is what I do think is one of the main advantages of a currency like Bitcoin, is that it makes people, even though they not really understand the principles of liberty, it makes people live by them. Because if you run your Bitcoin full node, right, you are a complete sovereign over your money. Nobody, absolutely nobody is taking that away from you. And that means regardless if you believe in individual sovereignty or not, if you own your keys, you own your Bitcoin, period. And it just makes liberty so convenient. And especially because it is so convenient, even the layman might use it. And this is, in my opinion, why agorism is such a beautiful ideology, is that it is providing liberty in the most productive and accessible format, which is just things that you can do, and making these things as efficient as possible.
By the way, since you have Rothbard in the name of this podcast, I have to point out, and you're talking about agorism, which was Sam Konkin's baby, that this Rothbard was majorly wrong about. What you just said, Rothbard, this is the one thing, like, I'm in on the history of the nerdiness of all the, like, back and forth in the development of the movement, but Sam Konkin III wrote a new, what's the name of it? New Libertarian Manifesto, I think is the title of the book, something like that. And it laid out his theory of agorism. And that was, conducting your economic interactions as much as possible outside of government control, or engaging in black market activity as a deliberate way to disempower the state. And one of Konkin's, points in this is that anybody can do it, and it might not be easy if you're working a wage slave job to not have taxes taken out of your paycheck, obviously. But Rothbard came back, and Rothbard tried her theory of agorism in favor of political action. And I'm kind of with Rothbard in the sense that tactically, intellectual and political action is more important than agorism for changing society, with possibly the exception of Bitcoin. Possibly the exception of Bitcoin that neither of them foresaw at that point, right? At least nowhere near as magnificent as Bitcoin actually turned out to be. Some of them, to be fair, and I'm sure both Rothbard and Konkin at some point envisioned some form of digital money at the dawn of the age of computers in their day, but none of them could have predicted exactly what Bitcoin was to become and fundamentally to be. But Rothbard's criticism of Konkin and agorism itself was that it would have no appeal to the common man. And really, I've read Rothbard's critique. It's totally wrong. And Konkin's brilliant to say, no, it has the most appeal to the common man, even though in its most fundamental way as a wage slave, it might be very difficult to embrace in that one dimension. Even for that wage slave, it is all the more valuable that they can then take their money out of the system and use it in a black market. They can, even if they're getting paid in a wage slave job where they can't have their withheld, they can take their money that they earn, they can use it in their community, they can barter, they can buy things that they're not paying taxes on, they can do everything they can in the rest of their lives to engage in agorism and save a ton of money on taxes and live more free and be happier as a result. That's huge. So really, it has the most value for them. And like I said, I keep going back to this. I do believe that Rothbard was still fundamentally right that, intellect activism are going to be more central to humanity achieving a free society. Now we have the possibility with Bitcoin to say to the government, hey, we don't need your money anymore. Screw you. We made our own. And that's one place where I see like a major chunk of the government racket falling away because of agorism. But I can actually prove, even with that agorism by itself will not end the state. And I can prove this from historical example, because in the United States, in the first presidential election held here, they said it was only white landowning males who could vote. And it was less than 2% of the population that actually voted. And the government didn't say, oh, shucks, I guess we don't have a public mandate. I guess we don't have enough of a consensus. Oh, we're going to have to go home and throw out the Constitution and go back to the Articles of Confederation. No, they said, screw the government anyway, and we're going to force ourselves on you. So this is why agorism can never completely abolish the state, because unless you could get practically 100% of the population on board. I guarantee you will create a political consensus for localization before you convince 95% of the population to be agorist, because if you had 95% of the population perfectly agorist, which is still very, very, very difficult, and you had 5% of the population working wage-slave jobs and loving government and paying their taxes and voting, they'd still send men with guns to come fuck with you. And you still live under the state in that scenario. You have to convince a critical mass, even if it's just 2.6% of that remaining, put down the guns of government in order for this madness to stop.
The interesting question, though, is that, especially compared now to the American Revolution of Independence, they did not go to the king and wrote a paper in the office of king resigning their position. They said, no, we are independent, fuck off. So this is a fundamentally different approach of declaring independence and giving up the power of control internally. So do you think that there's an inherent difference here?
I think there's an inherent similarity in that when the American people elect someone on the platform of dissolving the federal government entirely, it will be their declaration of, no, we're not. It's not a declaration of independence, because you could say it's every state declaring independence at the same time. But no, you're just trying to recycle the historical term there. But it is a declaration. It is a line in the sand. We're saying, no, sorry, federal government is not allowed to exist anymore because we voted, we took away our consent through your system. Fuck you. Your system says you're not allowed to exist anymore, right? Like, that doesn't get any better than that. Now, I do think that we have evolved to the point now that we can have such an nation without ensuing violence. In the Revolutionary War, it was kind of set up deliberately for that confrontation. Now, a lot of people are quick to point out, well, except for ending fascism and Stalinism and blah, 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 and slavery, war never solved anything, right? And the point is that war can be good and valid and achieve great things. However, I can cut out every tumor from you with an axe if you want. It's not as good as a scalpel, but I can do it. I'll get that tumor out of your body. That's what violent revolution is versus non-violent revolution. It's like, you have a tumor to cut out. Do you want to use a battle axe, or do you want to use a scalpel? Better for the healthy body of society, obviously, the scalpel. So the first American Revolution was sort of set up as that violent conflict. But if you look at what Gandhi was able to achieve in India, nonviolent revolution was more successful. And historically speaking, around the world, nonviolent revolutions are always more successful because they allow for women and children and old people to be involved in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. And that simply, going galt, removing your consent from the system, is more effective than violently opposing it. So in this context, we get to repeat some very important elements of the American Revolution. We are overthrowing, once again, the biggest empire the world has ever seen, but we are doing it in a much more intelligent way, in a much more evolved way. And I don't think it'll be necessary to fire a single shot. I don't think there will be any meaningful, violent resistance if we do this right.
Good points that you bring up, and of course, you do speak the truth, and you speak it harshly, of course, and you stand in the truth, which is good. But this means that I'm sure not everyone likes you, and of course, the people in power absolutely do not like you because you actively say that we should take the power away from them and give it back to the people. And of course, a statement like this will oftentimes not be tolerated by those that are currently in power. And the question to you would be, how have you experienced the pushback from the status quo? How have you maybe even experienced censorship and ignorance by the current system?
Well, but first, I just want to quote one of my favorite YouTubers, Stormcloud's Gathering. And he says something I'm probably going to get the wording off, but to the effect that, the truth is extreme. To make it moderate is to lie. And I would say the truth is hard. To soften it is to lie. And I appreciate you pointing that out. In my experience, the worst thing that I had, and I've done jail time for civil disobedience, but that's stuff that I set myself up for very deliberately, as opposed to things that were unnatural consequences of that. And the biggest one for me was with, for people that don't know my background, I had a radio show after I ran for Congress in New Mexico on AM 1550 KIVA, more positive talk radio, Albuquerque. And then I got picked up as a television show, and that was Adam versus the Man on RT America. And when it got canceled, I went to podcasting and focusing on my YouTube channel. And I'm up to almost 250,000 subscribers now and 70 million views. But for the last 5 years or so, since 2013, when it was soon after Google bought YouTube, I was severely demonetized and kind of shadow demonetized. And I was censored on YouTube before it was cool, man. That for my experience, it was, and I didn't figure this out till like years later. But the best understanding I have of this now is that because I had weed and marijuana as default tags underneath all my videos, that when they took the YouTube system and imposed the Google AdWords system, that it automatically made all of my videos like unsuitable for advertisers or too controversial. And so my revenue got cut over about 2 months in early 2013 from $6,000 a month to $2,000 a month, even though I was still doing 2 million views per month. And, that's pretty significant. That's a lot of eyeballs. So being sort of shadow banned. And then on Facebook, same thing. On Facebook, I've been banned a number of times for, I put up a picture of a girl who had been a victim of one of Obama's drone strikes. And it's not gory, like here's blood and guts. It's like she's covered in bandages, but she's naked. And they try to say that. And by the way, you know how Obama's slogan was forward, right? During his campaign, it had the Obama O forward. Well, I crossed out the D, and so it said for war. And, it had that the picture of the little girl. And I was banned for a month because of that. And that's one, petty example. I got a bunch of anti-Jewish hate mail, and I posted a screenshot of like my inbox from my cell phone with the subject lines like "Die kike Jew scum," crap like just I'm silly. And I put it on Facebook to say, hey, here's what it's like being a public figure as a controversial Jew in America. There's still this bullshit. And I got banned for posting anti-Semitic comments. And it's like this. And I sidebar rant here real quick. When Facebook says, well, we don't allow racism on our platform, so when we see something racist, we hide it from you. Like, no, you're just hiding the racism. You're not doing anything about the racism. Like, if my friend posts something that I find, inappropriate, I want to be able to either unfriend him or confront him and deal with it. As it is, Facebook is not a tool for dealing with racism. It's a tool that hides it. Like your friend will just get banned and you will never know. You could be sitting next to a racist and Facebook will help them hide that shit. Like that's a problem. Like, sorry, Facebook, you are promoting racism. Do you not, like, with your bullshit design, attempt at virtue signaling and trying to be politically correct, you are promoting and preserving racism. Like, how nuts is that? But for me, just being shadow banned from the beginning. I used to do a lot of interviews on mainstream TV networks when I was just the anti-war guy before I was the libertarian guy. I've had people who have interviewed me get consequences for their YouTube channels, which is like really messed up. That's like, you can't even interview Adam for your channel without having, like, Kokesh has got to be pinged, somewhere as like a key word. Algorithms is like, nope, take it out. So I'm really grateful for Steemit, as blockchain-based social media, where it has its downsides, but at least that kind of centralized control and censorship. And as I'm actually, if I may get in a bit of a personal plug here. I'm currently looking for sponsors and donors and investors to bring back Adam versus the Man as a 2-hour live Monday through Friday podcast. And if anybody wants help out with that, please email me adamline.com. And of course, we're looking at 2 people in addition to the one who I have as who would be a business and distribution director for this operation. So I think it's a really important time. And now people are starting to realize that they cannot rely on their YouTube feed or their Facebook, news stream for a reliable flow of content, just that isn't censored. So I think it's a good time. I think right now, Alex Jones is being used as controlled opposition, as he always has been to certain degrees. But and I, by the way, I love Alex Jones. I think he's entirely honest and genuine. But he's being put forth as like he's the conservative who's being censored, and they want it to look like it's liberals censoring conservatives. Liberals censoring conservatives, as in nobody else existed view of the political world where it's left versus right. There's no libertarian, there's no Greens, there's no independents, and that's what's being missed. As bad as Alex Jones may have been affected by some of these policies, it's not him as the guy who, remember, even as the main guy questioning 9/11, he was put on terrestrial radio on AM stations all over the country. The gatekeepers wanted him to be the representative of the 9/11 truth movement. So it's not just about me. I certainly don't want to imply that I'm the one who got screwed and forgotten, but that there were probably a few hundred just in the United States, YouTubers, independent media operators, teams, productions, businesses that have gotten shut down and shut out, and I would hope like for this, and I kind of want to end every interview I do mentioning this, so I'll do it now while I'm thinking about it, is that, for Reed Rothbard, use Bitcoin, that this is an independent media operation that is never going to YouTube. It's never going to get a share fake on Facebook, let alone mainstream media, Max, for a show, right? It's not going to happen. And in order for us to have these alternative voices, and I do think it is critically important to human progress. Not only do we have to be conscientious consumers of information, but promoters and supporters. So, I hope you support Max, share this interview, share his work, support whatever other independent media operations that are important to you. Don't just be a casual observer, because, a lot of these, they all, depend on your active support as a viewer, as a listener, for them to continue. So, Max, I hope that you're able to upgrade your studio soon here.
Well, yes, I do hope as well, and but that's the cool thing with Bitcoin, and that's what really gives it so much value, is that with this little QR code right here, you can give us control over a couple Satoshis. Doesn't have to be much, just a couple, And that is something that can nobody ever take away from us. You can send a little package of liberty to Adam right here in this QR code to help with his, I'm quite sure, a really expensive fundraising campaign. And this is something that is of importance, and every little bit helps. Every little contribution helps. Of course, same goes for me. Right here, that little QR code works for Bitcoin. That's what Bitcoin is all about. It gives you financial sovereignty again. And once you have that, once you are at this place of a solid foundation, you can then give to others, right? Once you have a solid standing in truth and liberty, then you can ultimately go out and spread it, give it to others, and hand on the baton. So that is why this is so important. That is why not just Bitcoin, but liberty in general is so important. So Adam, thank you very much for coming here live on the World Crypto Network. That was fantastic. We've talked about a lot. Maybe something, maybe just to finish out. Is there something that we have not yet talked about? Something that you would like to mention?
Well, I noticed you have a live chat. Is there anything from the chat room that you want to mention to honor the people who are engaged there and maybe air some of their questions or comments?
Oh yeah, that is a great question. It's always nice to intermingle with the chat. And we had some discussions earlier about the way of or about this march on Washington that you had back in, I think it was 2012 or something. And the question here is, how quote unquote provocative can you be in peaceful resistance? Because of course, having an open carry march is still peaceful, right? As long as you do not use your weapons, nobody's being harmed. As long as you only use them in self-defense, you're not harming anyone. Everything is peaceful. But of course, it is provocative. And maybe a question here would be then, where is the line? Where do we have to stop being, or where do we have to kind of be silent about our rights, just so to not be provocative?
Sure. Well, let me just say, I preface my answer by saying that I'm very much of a scientific mind in all of this. I'm very much an objectivist, and yet I have to acknowledge that what we are doing in communicating these ideas and in motivating people and inspiring people and reaching people at an emotional level is way more art than science. And that's not to say there is not a science to it or behind it, but that as far as my little brain can figure, there's no science to approaching someone on the street and being able to connect with them at a level where you're able to fundamentally touch them and change. Well, there's the science of this and that, but no, in the bigger picture, and especially when it comes to, I want to change the course of, I want to accelerate the bend towards justice that Martin Luther King Jr. described, that I want to be a part of this. I want to forward this message. And part of it means I got to get people's attention, and I got to be provocative. There is no line. This is art. There are no lines in art. There are no boundaries. There are no rules. And that's, hey, that happens to be anarchy too, right? There are no rules for how to spread anarchy, right? My favorite graffiti is where, there's a piece of graffiti that says spread anarchy, and underneath it says don't tell me what to do. Have fun, enjoy the process. And if you see it as art, and I really do, like, I've a lot of people don't know that my background, when people ask me, like, how did you become such a mediocre public speaker? I say that I have a significant background in theater. I was a theater dork in school. Like, every year I was in one major production. I was in musicals. I was on the dance team in college. I did one act, all sorts of stuff like that in performing arts. And I think that is a really important part of what makes me effective in being able to communicate something that I grapple with in everything that I do. that's public, like that. Like, is this something I'm making for them, or what's the point of this? Why am I doing it? And then at some point you have to let go. And this is just sort of, I guess, general life advice as well, that I sort of tease out of my experience in activism, that, especially for the personality types that we tend to be as INTJs, the kind of intellectual, got to figure out and understand the system. We very much want to be analytical and precise and deliberate, but in order for this to work, we have to connect with people who aren't like us. And if we want to connect with people who aren't like us, at some point we have to embrace the side of us that is more universally human than that inclination to figure out systems and be analytical. There's something more fundamentally human to dancing and playing and loving and moving humanity forward that way. And to me, that's what I've had to do to let go in my activism to get to the point, load a shotgun in Washington, D.C. I can go literally dance in Memorial. I can go curse at a cop where it's literally illegal to do so. And all of my greatest successes were predicated on a certain letting go and just saying, okay, I'm going to dance the dance. And I'm going to love it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to have a lot more fun doing that than trying to hold on and be controlling. That's so very, very statist of us, isn't it?
Yes, I like that point as well. And maybe another question here from Rico Coin Report. He asks if you've ever lived in another country, and if so, what were your thoughts about getting these different cultural experiences, and also exiting kind of the American state and seeing how other states perform. What were your experiences here?
Yeah, I can't say I've really lived in another country. I've spent a few weeks in countries, in a lot of different countries here and there. I've been all over Europe. Like I said, I had a girlfriend in Austria for a while and learned German with her. I've done, I did a tour in Japan, in Germany, with the rock Veteranen der Rock, Gegen der, I can't remember the translation of Rock Veterans Against the War. Veterock, der Kriegen, what is against the war in German anyway?
Gegen den Krieg.
Gegen den Krieg. So I was close. Yeah, I had it. I just wasn't confident. Yeah. Veteranen der Rock gegen den Kriegen. And so I did a bit of a tour in Germany, and I've spent altogether several months in Mexico, and been to Argentina, and obviously Iraq and Kuwait on my way in. But I think there's there really is a difference that most Americans don't appreciate enough, which is that we really are the outliers in the world in terms of respect for government and authority. And it's really kind of sad that, allegedly starting as the freest country on earth in that one fundamental cultural way, we really have become the least free country on earth, very much obsessed with government. It's the kind of thing where in a lot of the rest of the world, someone will go to like light up a cigarette in, somewhere and go, wait, oh my God, isn't that illegal here? Like, really, can you do that? And it's, and everybody around the world is like, yeah, why are you Americans so uptight about that shit? It's like, we don't know. We don't have those hang-ups here. We just do what we want. And I mean, it's obviously I'm generalizing in a lot of ways, but there is that fundamental attitude shift that I think most Americans would benefit from being exposed to. I certainly have, and I've certainly realized it is highlighted for myself because, like, I was in the Marine Corps. I was as statist as you could get, and even now, having been out of the military for a little over 12 years, 11 and a half years, excuse me, about 11 and a half years, been out of the military entirely. I still notice the residual psychological effects, and I don't mean PTSD. I mean, in terms of like response to authority, to, someone yelling at you and getting in your face. And of course, I mean, my response is, like, I don't back down. I don't cower, but I notice that I have, in my response, that my response is very much colored by my prior relationships with authority, for better or for worse.
Oh, yes, and I do believe that the current state of military is pretty much the pinnacle of mind control and of literally brainwashing and of making people accept authority. And then
Yeah.
that is quite a dangerous thing, and I do believe that it is hard to get rid of. Then another conversation from Blake Anderson in the chat. He asks about your coin portfolio and of what it consists of, and if you would come back to Bitcoin. He later says that that loads of OG libertarians that he used to hang out with bought the Bcash lie and got scammed by Dash and Steemit. He wants you back. So can
Well,
you come back?
oh man, it's funny because I know Blake, and I think we met through Twitter and originally really good interactions on this. And right now, I always have a diversified portfolio in crypto, and I think that's critical because I don't think even if you're a Bitcoin absolutist or maximalist, I think you have to admit that any one coin at this point in the development of the technology could go to zero at any point. And if it was Bitcoin, if there was some fundamental flaw, or even like I mentioned earlier, if someone wanted to attack it with just a PR campaign, we could get a flippening. It's not going to decrease the overall demand for crypto. So I think investing in crypto as a whole is extremely safe, but having all of your eggs in one basket or dollars in any one crypto is an unnecessary liability. So I've always been a fan of this idea, and I don't even remember who I heard it from, but that a good crypto portfolio would be half in or a third Bitcoin, and then a portion, maybe a third of sort of medium risk or low risk, well established competing altcoins, and then a third in sort of ones that you're as long shot investments, or as even if you're not betting on to displace Bitcoin meaningfully in the long term, they're going to have some short value and increase in the short to midterm range. So my portfolio always varies based on my personal financial situation, because I'm much better at using Bitcoin than saving Bitcoin, and I don't want to say what I'm into right now because it's a little bit unbalanced based on some expenses I've had to cover lately that I'm not too happy about. But I generally stick to that approach to investing in crypto, and my general advice for investing is that you should first have a backstop of gold and silver, a survival fund of something that's just not dependent on electronics or any networks. That in a survival situation, networks go down. Bitcoin's not going to help you. Sorry, no matter if Verizon is down and I can't get data on my cell phone out here on my land, I'm screwed. So I think everybody, just general financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This is just how I apply my understanding of the world to myself, and I think other people can take this broad advice for themselves. But everybody should have some form of savings in metals, gold and silver, or something similar that's an ultimate backstop, that's a physical, tangible reality. Maybe it's not very much. It might be as little as a few $100s, might be a few thousand, it might be just get out of town money, it might be just starve or trade with the neighbors kind of money. That's fine. Excuse me. I think people should invest in something of a larger tangible asset, as I'm investing in my land here, which is very small. You know, it was $13,000 for 11 acres in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, in a beautiful community here. And then I think the rest, I think, is in terms of investments, I think it should all be in crypto. You know, and maybe people would have, if you wanted to be an active investor, to have something sort of in between land and crypto in terms of volatility, like you know, business investments, or you know, I would hesitate to ever advise anyone to get involved in the stock market at this point, but something that's sort of that level of risk and reliability, at least traditionally, or something in that category of investment. And then really, my biggest bet, you know, once I've got that taken care of, once I've got my, you know, I've got my personal business, I've got my emergency funds and things that I want to invest in, businesses in it, and it's all in crypto. You know, that's the biggest, safest bet, I think. Like I said, never any individual crypto, but as a whole, you know, a safe basket of cryptocurrencies, that's a very safe bet. I think that's the best investment you can make today.
I absolutely agree with you on that point that you should have some gold, some silver, and
There's
especially
Rothbard.
a Rothbard coin. Why not? I mean, come
Beautiful.
on, this is privately minted coinage, and I love it. And absolutely, these are, I do treasure very, very much. And, you know, having some gold, having some silver is the ultimate currency offline, right? There has never been a better currency than precious metals in meat space. And that's why Hayek famously said that we humans most likely will never invent, human-made, a currency that is superior to gold or silver. Well, maybe Bitcoin had proved him wrong, right? Maybe we did now make a man-made system that is superior to gold, at least in cyberspace.
Yeah. Oh, and I hope in 5 years I can drop the gold and silver advice and be like, no, that's silly. It's not even worth the effort. Our networks are so reliable. Our cryptos are so dominant. You don't have to worry about that. Just save crypto, invest wisely. And that the idea of having gold and silver is kind of silly. But until we get there, you know, we live in this world where government does violence and things are unpredictable and wars happen. And I still think you need that backstop, but not for long. Not for long.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's always good to have a backup and a backup to the backup. But most importantly, not only should you own your keys, right? But you should also own your coins. So this is important. This is all about self-sovereignty in money, right? And you do not have that with fiat dollars and fiat euros and paper money. You absolutely do not have that with gold certificates and paper certificates. And you absolutely don't have that with a Coinbase account. So if you use money, use it in a form that is uncensorable and where you truly hold control over that money. So Adam, it was a pleasure talking to you. It really was lots of a fun conversation. And we went over quite a bit. But first of all, I want to tell everyone here to check out Adam's several websites. Of course, yeah, at Kokesh for President for the main campaign. You can get the book, Freedom, by the way, nice logo, for free, of course, here at thefreedomonline.com. And then, yeah, you could read it here. Also, check out Ethics of Liberty, amazing book by Mary Rothbard, the first one that Adam read. And check out For a New Liberty, the Libertarian Manifesto from Rothbard that I first read. So that is always nice. Also, the New Libertarian Manifesto by SAK3, quite a nice read as well. Guys, thank you so much also for donating here to Adam and supporting him on his path towards literally dissolving the government. This is quite a worthy cause, in my opinion. And here is your opportunity to give back and to support him on his path. And also, you can support me here and further providing you this content. So this fund directly goes to Purism, where they have open source hardware and software, privacy-focused computers. So if you would like to get more content on here, and if you like to get a couple more in-depth videos on what this technology can bring as part of the Open Source Everything show, this is your possibility of donating right here. If you want to support my bachelor thesis, please check out on github.com the paper that I'm writing on anarchy in money, talking about lots of the stuff that we have talked about here on this show. That, guys, is pretty much it so far. Adam, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we get to do this again.
Likewise. Dankeschön.
Bitteschön, sehr, sehr gut. Guys, see you on the next one. Bye-bye.